Good afternoon, good morning, whichever time zone you are in. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Wednesday to join us. My name is Jamie Kidder. I am the National Outreach Director for College Living Experience, and joining me today is Dr. Karen Rayne, co-founder and executive director of Unhushed. Now, online relationships are a large part of our everyday lives, and especially in the lives of our young people. And so it's vital that we equip them with the tools that they need to navigate those relationships safely. So after meeting Dr. Rayne at a community resources event last spring and hearing more about Unhushed and their mission, I knew that we needed to partner in some way to help support young adults in that online footprint. So just before we begin, just a few housekeeping things. Please keep your cameras off and your mics muted. And Dr. Rayne will have a link or a QR code up on the screen where you can ask questions. We're going to not use the chat feature or the Q&A feature for this webinar. She's going to be able to get to those questions in real time through that link and that QR code that she'll post. So without any further fanfare, and again, we are experiencing some technical issues. So if we all of a sudden are gone, jump back in and we will get it restarted and we'll restart where we left off. So without any further fanfare, I'm going to turn the mic over to Karen and we can get this party started. Dr. Rayne?
Thanks so much, Jamie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just as a side note, please feel free to call me Karen. I make my undergraduate students at the University of Texas call me Dr. Rayne. And then when people are assholes to me, I also make them call me Dr. Rayne. But you are neither. And so please feel free to call me Karen. We are here today to talk about internet relationships and navigating those internet relationships. One of the things that I'm terrible about is remembering to introduce myself. So I put a slide about it into these slides so that I did not forget. I have a PhD in educational psychology. I have been working broadly in the field of education with a focus on sexuality education for the last 20 years. And I work here in Texas where I live. I also work around the country and I work around the world. And I love supporting our young folks. I also am a parent of a kid with disabilities and who is autistic. And so also the thing that I'm enjoying bringing to this today is some of that kind of like personal, professional overlap kind of space. So that's a little bit about me. And my student is currently my young person, my daughter is currently a college student. So she fits very well within the purview of all the things we're talking about today. So now I want to learn a little bit about all of you. There's not a ton of you here. That's okay. But one of the benefits of you all being here, let me get this QR code up, is that I can talk to you specifically. And so I'm interested in hearing a little bit about who you are. If you could grab that QR code, either with your phone or an iPad, you can also look at the top of the screen where it says join at menti.com. So if you go to menti.com and put this code in 33318904, you'll be able to access this. And the benefit of this system is that it's also the place where you're going to be asking your questions. So you can ask me questions at any point in time, and I can stop and be sure to answer them. So as I see people kind of like hopping in and putting in their answers, that's lovely. I'm going to keep talking while you're doing that. Because I do want this to be a really responsive kind of experience while this is recorded. And of course, we might have folks in the future of watching this. Hello, future people. Welcome to you as well. We're glad you're here. You know, y'all are the ones who are able to be here on this lovely Wednesday midday, depending on which time zone you're in. And so I want to be sure that I speak directly to what you have going on. So I see at least one of you has been in a relationship with someone you met online. One of you is a parent of a neurodiverse person. Two of you are mentors for neurodiverse folks. That's great. So this just kind of gives me an idea of like who I'm talking with, like, what are your experiences with these topics? I see none of you are saying that you were excited to talk about online relationships. I hope to change that by the end of today. That's the goal. We'll see if I reach that goal at the end. Jamie, remind me about this at the end and let me know if you think that I have achieved this goal. Because I want to. I want you to leave today like, yes, I'm ready. Let's go have these conversations. They're going to be fun. They're going to be interesting. We're going to engage in them, and it's going to be a good time. All right, I see someone has a question, so I'm going to let you all see what that looks like. Oh, you can only select one. Oh, well, thank you for letting me know that my Mentimeter has failed me today. I will fix it for next time. All right, but it's good to kind of get a sense of where y'all are, and we're gonna keep bopping along. So a little bit about the neurodiverse young people in your life. I think that with this one, if you can only choose one, yeah, choose the one that you feel like you're like, oh yes, like this is the overwhelming like feeling that I'm getting. This is the right one to say, even if more than one of them is, you know, accurate, especially if we're talking about like how old they are or what level they are in at school. You know, if you're like, oh, like they talk to me all the time about their online relationships, go ahead and click that one. If you're like, oh, they have been catfished by someone online and like that has been a struggle, click that one. Maybe you are able to click more than one on this one. Fantastic. I love that. And for those of you, I'm just going to put this QR code back up here in case anybody is still looking for it. So a couple in high school, one in college, some excitement, some dating people online. Great. Some catfished experiences. Brilliant. Okay, let's keep going. What are you hoping to learn in this session? I want to be sure that I take and I hear from y'all about what exactly it is that's kind of like driving you to be here today. What is the overarching question or concern or thing happening in your mind about like this topic that has made you decide to spend an hour or so of your time here today with us? Because again, you know, I want to be sure that I'm hearing from you where your uncertainties are, where your enthusiasm is, all of the things that you have to offer here or in this space to kind of inform our next 40 minutes together as we talk through all kinds of these beautiful things. I'm not seeing anything up here yet. I'm going to give you just a few minutes more, just so that y'all can finish typing or whatever it is that you're doing. How to help my young adult with online connections, his presentation towards, but also his online profile. Oh, okay, yeah. Online profiles are interesting. Okay, how we can best support neurodiverse young adults navigating online friendships, relationships. Sure, yep. That is well in there. How to build an online profile well is not something that I had thought about, but now I'm excited to like, as my brain is turning. And so I'll try to make sure that we kind of weave that in as I'm talking things through. Online predators. Yeah. So how do we deal with online predators and folks who are making choices around meeting people? You know, I have a friend, this is a friend of a friend who has a 19-year-old daughter who, as far as I'm aware, is not neurodiverse, but is online and is a 19-year-old young person. And she's been in an online relationship with a man from Thailand for more than a year now. And he was supposed to come to the United States to meet her and in January, which she was very excited about, but he has bought her a ticket to go see him now. And, you know, she's 19. There's nothing her mother can do to stop her from going to Thailand to meet this man. But talk about stressful, you know, and I've talked with a couple of people about it. And one of my other friends was like, I would hide her passport. I would take her passport and I would hide it. And I would not would like absolutely prevent her from going. Another friend who was like, oh, I would be absolutely going with her. Like there's no way that I would not be on that plane with her. Okay, yeah, finding a balance of online and in-person social connections. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. This is all useful information. If things come up that I'm not mentioning or you have further questions, we're going, use the Mentimeter platform, ask me those questions. I am excited to be here for you today and start talking about some things. So here's our starting points. Many young people receive effective online safety information from school. Starting in middle school, sometimes starting in elementary school, these things are already out there. And some of them are very good. Some of them are not very good. But understanding that you're the young person in your life, the young people who you are supporting, probably this is not the first time they'll be talking about internet safety. And hearing the same thing over and over and again can end up diminishing its impact. They could be like, oh, I know. Yes. Like I've heard, I know. And so we having, a starting dialogue where we are open to what they know as a starting place is really important, rather than us coming in with information without taking into account their starting place. Once certainly we're looking at folks in college, but also in the later high school years, we need to be thinking of these young adults as adults. And adult learning is very different from child and adolescent learning processes. And one of the things that's the most different about it is that we have to be respectful of what information, knowledge, and skills they're bringing into the conversation to begin with. Because if we're not at a starting place respectful of those, even if they are our own children, right? Like we have been there the whole time. We have seen them make poor choices. Doesn't matter. If we are not respectful of the things that they're bringing to the space, they're not going to be respectful of the things that we are bringing to the space. So a set of simple safety rules followed by ongoing conversations is what most young people need. Now, you might be like, no, my kid never received any safety training, online training. Like I talked to them about it. I know they haven't had it. Those young people are going to need some more things. Absolutely. And there are some simple things here too. Like the internet is very much like a city. And as in a physical city, there are some spaces that are safe to be in, and there are some spaces that are not safe to be in. The same thing is true of the internet. There are some places that are safe to be in, and there are some spaces that are not safe to be in. Now, the degree to which you're a young person in your life appreciates or connects with metaphors, regardless of that, the fact of the matter is that they need to know that there are some safe spaces and there are some unsafe spaces. There are some safe people and there are some unsafe people. All of those things are true, whether we are IRL or we are in a digital environment. So here is kind of a broad overview of some safety rules, which really kind of break down to being about questions to ask. So is this person who they say they are? Overwhelmingly, this is the question that most people get the most worried about. Is this other person representing themselves accurately to me? Now, the thing that I want to start off by acknowledging is that people can lie to us about who they are online and in person. It is easier to do it online. Accurate. It is also the fact, however, that people do it in person. And so lying about who someone is not something that is restricted solely to the online space. And so being prepared to how do I know whether someone is being truthful with me about who they are and everything they're bringing to the relationship, which is tied in very closely to our next slide over here, which is our next question. Is this relationship the same level of importance to the other person as it is to me? And by that, I also mean are we also in agreement about what we want from the relationship? All of these things where is this relationship happening in parity in some way, or is there an imbalance in commitment, in honesty, in all of these elements that make up relationships, in connectivity? So are they who they say they are? And are we both showing up in the relationship in authentic ways where we're being truthful about what we're looking for from it and what we're willing to give into it? Now, these and all of the other questions are actually the same that you'd ask if you met someone in real life. And that's just it's just true, right? People can get duped on the phone. I just listened to a podcast the other day about someone who who was like part of the FBI and like catching people who were making phone calls and trying to get people to give them money over the phone. You know, this, what's happening here on the internet is not entirely new. It's just a new platform and we're still getting to understand it. You know, I had a friend that for a variety of reasons, you know, I knew for almost a decade online before we had any video contact with each other or any in real life contact. We talked on the phone, but that was it. And, you know, we got on Zoom recently and she was like, neither of us are, you know, neither of us are princes from Nigeria. That's amazing. And, you know, it was like this whole like funny little kind of moment and experience. But, you know, most of the people online are showing up as themselves. Most of them are. There are some who are not. And so understanding that boundary of someone lying about who they are is important. And it's incredibly hard to discern. You know, and so for our young folks who are like, oh, like, I don't even know. I don't know, like, I just know I love this person and I don't want to even think about like whether or not they are who they say they are. You know, all of these potential issues. Yeah, it's all really hard. It is. It absolutely is. But we can ask these questions and we can start to dig into in those ongoing conversations that you are having with them, right? We're not giving them like, I'm not here to give you like a piece of paper with like a list of check boxes for them to like go down the list for whether or not they are who they say they are. You know, as much as I would like to be able to be like, here's a you know, a step-by-step guide for ascertaining whether the person is who they say they are, it's just not that simple. And it has a huge potential impact on physical and emotional safety. You know, one of the things that y'all were talking about and some of the things you're hoping to talk about today is that like emotional safety piece. And I think that a lot of folks have a gut reaction that an online relationship is not as emotionally safe as an in-person relationship, or that a person who someone met online is not as safe as emotionally as someone who they met in real life. But this is not really the case anymore. Jamie, there's some recent data that came out, and I meant to go look it up this morning, and then I totally forgot about how people are meeting now and how people have met their spouse over the last, it's like 100 years or something. Could you try to find that for us real quick? That'd be amazing. And what it shows is that people are meeting their spouses online. Overwhelmingly, huge percentages of people are meeting their spouses online now. And so, you know, most people online are who they say they are. They are showing up authentically as themselves. Those relationships are turning into like long-term good relationships. If Jamie finds that, we'll share it with you out in a minute. And then this one, is this relationship the same level of importance to the other person as it is to me? And this is the exact same problem that lots of young people have in real life, right? Where they're trying to navigate and negotiate and understand another person. And this is obviously like a slightly higher bar for our neurodiverse young folks. It can be harder to do both in person and online because there can be an expectation of people being accurate and honest and how they're showing up. That doesn't necessarily reflect how people actually do it, and not through any sense of nefariousness even, right? But if someone is saying something because they feel like it's the polite thing to say or the kind thing to say, but you know, our neurodiverse young people can be like, no, I just thought you meant what you said. But this is no different than their experience in the online environment. And so trusting that online space is not all that different from in person. All right, Jamie, what did you find for us?
So there are several reports out there. It's 10%, currently, but there is a steady increase in the number of relationships that start online, whether they're friendships or their marriages. So
Yeah.
it's continuing to increase.
And it's just going to keep going up. I met my spouse online, and, we were both entirely who we said we were going to be. And, like, this is just a thing that is happening. And this is a thing that is really hard to suss out, whether we are online or in person. And for at least some of our neurodiverse young people, the addition of like body language and facial expressions doesn't actually add to their capacity to suss this bit out, in a way that it might for other folks. So we're giving them the same kind of support. And that's what this comes back to, is that we're going to give them the same kind of support that we give them about IRL relationships. Because there's only a very few things that are really different. So this is what I would like you to think through for me here. What are some questions that you would encourage the neurodiverse young folks in your life to ask someone they have just met in real life? So we're back here at the Mentimeter. You can use that QR code, or you can go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen. But what are some questions that you would like to ask or be able to ask someone? Encourage your young person to ask someone who they just met to understand, are they who they said they are? Do they care about this relationship as much as I do? And then what else comes up around trusting someone and building a relationship with someone in such a way that's healthy and good for both of them? What do you think, Jamie? Do you have any thoughts on like other good questions to ask someone you just met in real life to get to know them and to increase this relational dynamic with them? You're muted.
I think finding common ground, common experiences, a lot of it is dependent on where you've met them. Was it a professional networking event? Was it on a college campus? But it's an environmental connection that would spark questions. But that's all done through give and take, two-way conversation.
Yeah, and all of those same kind of structures exist online, right? So both of my older kids who were in college had groups on various social media platforms of people who were in their programs or were housed in their dorms before they moved in. LinkedIn has very clear, professional networking experiences. So, there's ways to use the online social media environment in ways that are can offer more trust, right? Because this is how this person has gotten access to this group, was through some kind of academic or professional process. So what are you looking for in a friendship or relationship? That's a great question. And someone said here in the Q&A, tell me about your history and family relationships. Great question, right? These are this kind of like getting to know you questions that can increase trust and connection in the same way with an online person as an offline person. What do you like to do in your free time? All of these are questions that, anybody who is meeting someone in that digital space is going to be potentially asking and learning to ask, and can be guided to ask as a way of, finding connectivity with another person. What do you value? I love that. Yes. Lots of ways to find connection, lots of ways to build trust, and ultimately at the end of the day, we don't know if they're being honest or not. I had a friend who many years ago met her, husband offline. There was no online when they met. And they dated for years, and then they got married, and they were married for years. And then she found out that he was a drug addict, and in fact had been using drugs their entire relationship. So like there are ways for people to lie about who they are at all times. What we are looking for is trying to build trust and connection, acknowledging that lies nevertheless happen, and probably that my friend with this, who is married to a drug addict, she overlooked some red flags, that there might have been some red flags, right, that she chose not to pay attention to, like weird sums of money leaving their bank account, right? Like that would have probably been a red flag that she should have noticed, but for whatever reason, she didn't. And so we give our young people support around understanding red flags and thinking through red flags. These are all valid things, and you can find lists of red flags in a million places on the internet. I did not take the time to make you one here, but they are all over the place. What are you thinking, Jamie?
Can you name a couple of those? Just a few, especially for neurodiverse young people, because oftentimes what is a very blatant red flag to you and I may not be to them. So what are some of those significant, just one or two, maybe three, that really stand out as a red flag that's very easily overlooked?
Yeah, I think that what is easily overlooked very much depends on is a very, person by person kind of experience. So, one of the most common red flags that we talk about is trying to isolate someone from their friends and family. But what exactly does that look like? Because let me tell you, no one is going to come around and be like, I think I want to isolate you from your friends and family, so we're going to do that now, right? They do it in subversive ways. And so we need to be able to actually like talk about the specifics of what that looks like, which is more often about saying things that will reduce trust in friends and family. So like, oh gosh, it sounds like your family doesn't love you very much if they did that. That's an example of, trying to remove someone from their friends and family. And isolating them is by reducing trust, by saying, oh, but I have this other activity, and if you loved me, you would go with me to this other activity, instead of your family thing that you always do, put me first. That's an example of a way of isolating someone. And so, we need to take these red flags, like isolating someone from their friends and family, and translate them into like concrete, specific statements about what do the actions really look like. And I will say, I'm a big fan of like centering the margins, and then we can support everybody more thoroughly. I think everybody actually needs this like description of what these red flags look like as actions. I do a lot of educating and teaching around abusive relationships and what they look like. And like, an abusive relationship doesn't start with someone coming on the second date and punching you in the face, because then that person would never have a third date, right? Like that's not the way an abusive relationship starts. It's not the way abuse starts. Abuse starts in very small, teeny tiny ways of like, when they're angry, they stomp out of a room. And then when they're angry, they stomp out of a room and they brush you with their shoulder, right? And that happens over, months or years even. And then when they're angry, they just like body check you as they're walking out of the room, right? This very slow progression of abuse is the way that abuse happens. And it's the way it happens online as well, right? So, in an online environment, it's all going to be verbal as opposed to that physical kind of abuse. So saying things like, oh, I don't usually like, talking to somebody who looks like you. So that's an example of like a tiny way to start planting a seed of, oh, I'm like, this person wouldn't usually be with someone like me, so I should feel honored, right, that they are with me. And that's the beginning of that abuse trajectory. Yeah, does that help, Jamie? You think those are the right kind of examples that we're thinking about?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that certainly wasn't one that I was thinking about, but absolutely, that's a big one. Just the isolation piece of it.
Yeah. Some red flags for online dating that I found were a lack of regular communication or pushing for too much too soon. Yeah, and what is too much too soon is very much dependent on the person. So there are ranges, right, of like a normal amount of like, oh, I'm really falling for this person. I really want to be with them a lot kind of experience. Um, and that like, oh no, this is really too much too soon can be a very much like a gut check kind of thing. And so for folks who struggle to like hear that gut check in the same way, it can be really hard to think about like what is that, what does that mean? Um, and so I would say that if someone is experiencing a person online that is pushing for too much too soon, more than the person on the receiving end wants, or more than is necessarily like normal, right? A request for, oh, I feel like we're talking too much. Can we just like slow it down a little bit? Should be responded to respectfully. And so it's that response to boundary setting that is often an indication that somebody is looking for abuse. And so when we give our young people the tools around boundary setting, it gives them kind of like a fast forward button to see if someone is abusive or not. Because when somebody is like, oh, yeah, you have a boundary here, I'm here for it. Absolutely. That's an indication that they are more likely to respect future boundaries in other kinds of ways. So I would encourage you to like teach your young people language around boundary setting. Um, I love it in my classes when people try to push my boundaries. Y'all, my boundaries are ironclad. Like the idea of pushing my boundaries is kind of hilarious. Jamie doesn't even know me that well, and she's laughing. Like it's just not a thing that's going to happen. But what it does when someone tries to push my boundaries is that it allows me to demonstrate to everybody else in the room how one can set boundaries. Like, what does a response look like that holds a boundary without being mean, without being cruel, and without backing down? It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. One of my favorite activities, and now I'm just like talking, but one of my favorite activities to do with young people is to have them pretend to ask each other out. And so I draw names randomly. And so I'm like, okay, this person asked this person out on a date, and we have to get clarity on like, okay, are you clear you're asking them out on a date? Or are you just like, hey, you want to go to the movies, which could very much be as friends? How are we making sure that our intentions are clear? And then the other person who has been asked out has to say yes and accept the date. And then they do it again where they ask again, and that person has to say no and decline the date. And let me tell you, even in role play, all people, but especially people who have been socialized as girls, have an extremely difficult time saying no. They want to say, oh, I'm busy that night. Or they want to say, oh, I don't want to see that movie, but they don't want to say no. And that learning of how to just be very clear in a no is exceptionally useful in this online environment. And how to do it kindly. Like we want to, advocate for and support all kinds of kindness. Absolutely. But we need to be sure that we're doing it in such a way that is also offering a lot of clarity, because someone's boundaries should be respected in an ironclad sort of way. Okay, so here we go. What should you do? Like, okay, we've talked about like, the ways that IRL relationships and online relationships have a lot of overlap, have a lot of similarities. We talked about those red flags. And, here we go. Acknowledge that neurodiverse young people in your life, they will meet people online. They will. And so, I actually love the idea of sitting with someone and helping them create their online profile. I think there's a lot of value in that process and narrating it for them. Like, oh, let's find pictures of you, or let's write language that you feel like is truly you. Because, that is a really important part of honesty honesty when someone is online. And so if someone is using words or showing pictures that are not really them, then that is an indication that they're not an honest person. So this begins to like lay some groundwork around truthful and honesty, truth and honesty in the online space, because you can also say like, look, it'd be really easy to put someone else's picture and to put someone else's description in here. And so we're not going to do that because that's not morally appropriate. It's not truth. It's not honesty. It's not the way that you want to be in the world, for all these reasons. And so instead, we're going to create your online profile this way. And then let's also talk about, what are you hoping that people will learn about you from your online profile? What do you want them to experience when they see your online space that you have curated? And you have a lot of autonomy and choice around that. And the way that people will respond to you will be impacted by your choices. So you can also talk about like, oh, this kind of picture might result in this kind of response. In the same way that we talk about clothing choices, in the same way that we talk about, all of the ways that we show up physically IRL, we're going to talk about that in the ways that we show up with our pictures and with our words online. Because the way that we are representing ourselves does matter. So we're going to acknowledge they're going to meet people online. They're going to be online, and you can't and you shouldn't prevent it. So this is not a case of trying to stop a thing from happening. Instead, this is a space of trying to talk about it. This is a space of trying to be welcomed into their online environment in all ways. So when you go in and you're like, oh, this picture is really tacky, or, if you say this or you do this thing online, here's the kind of response you're going to get. What you're going to find is that there are some young people who might be into it, who might be like, oh yes, I'm looking for that kind of support. A lot of young people are not going to be looking for that kind of support. So I have a whole book called Breaking the Hush Factor that I think is really relevant to this topic. It's how to talk about sex, but I really feel like it's very relevant to all kinds of relationships and talking about all kinds of relationships, including online ones. And it's really about recognizing that every single time you have a conversation with a young person about their online world, you are interviewing for the next conversation with them. You are proving to them that you are worthwhile as a conversational partner, that you are prepared and ready to engage. The name of the book is Breaking the Hush Factor. And I think that the only place that you can buy it right now is our website, because we just had the second edition just came out. So it's unhushed.org. You should be able to find it for sale there. So you have to be willing to engage in conversations, and you have to be willing to engage in conversations where the people who you are the young people you are talking to are saying things that are potentially making you uncomfortable and potentially making you see red flags. And so then your job is to think of yourself as a consultant rather than thinking of yourself as a manager. You're not telling them what to do. Those years have passed. Instead, you are working with them where you are like, oh, think of it as more like a managing up or a consultative kind of experience where you're offering suggestions or asking questions that are open-ended to allow them to move into a space of seeing the red flags or the points of concern themselves. And you'll find that's a really effective way of having that dialogue in this ongoing sense. And you need to be authentically engaged, delighted even to discuss who they're meeting and talking with online. I mean, brings so much enthusiasm. If they are on some like chat board that is about anime and you are like, man, anime is so dull, like it just makes my eyes cross because I cannot find it in myself to be interested. Try so hard to be really enthusiastic and involved in their online anime discussions. Like have them show them to you, read along, be excited about the things that you can be excited about, find the pieces in it to build that connection between you and the young person, because it is those authentic conversations where you will really see and show them so they can see that you trust them, you love them, and you have a bridge of interest, which is going to allow them to come to you when something feels wrong. And without that bridge of interest, they might feel like they need to keep that part of themselves hidden away, which is never what we want. That's always going to reduce capacity. We always want them to feel like they are able to really come to you around this topic that usually inspires a lot of joy within your relationship. And so they will know that that relationship can hold a hard thing as well. So this is the only path to intervention. When a young person is experiencing a problematic online space experience, the only way that they can get help is if they have somebody who they trust with their online experiences, that they know they can go to, that they're not going to feel shame, that they're not going to feel shut down, that they're going to feel like they can have those authentic, delightful conversations with. And then that is the space where they can then come when something has gone wrong or something is a problem, because that does happen. Absolutely. And this is our path to intervention. This is our path to supporting our young people in such a way that it really authentically changes, what they're doing in that online space. All right, here's me. This is who I am. And that's the end of my thing. We have a few more minutes here. If y'all have questions, you can ask them either in the Q&A in Zoom, or you can ask them through the Mentimeter. Yeah. All right. What do you think, Jamie?
I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. I do have a quick question. We're talking a lot about online relationships from a personal relationship standpoint, but what about financial safety? Our neurodiverse young adults are so vulnerable in regard to, predators looking to gain financially. Is there a different tactic or a different conversation that needs to be had surrounding financial safety for young adults?
I mean, the first thing I would say is that financial safety is the same in person, on the phone, and on the internet. There are ways that people try to get money and other things from people in all three of those spaces. It is not just the internet. It might be happening at a greater percentage on the internet, but that's not the only space. And having sets of rules around, first of all, we never share our bank account numbers on the internet. That's just a good rule of thumb, right? There's no reason for anything other than our actual bank to request our banking information. And it should never be shared on the internet. It should never be shared on the phone. If the bank calls you, they're not going to need you to verify your account number with them. And so there's some basic safety things that are good to share. Absolutely. And then there's the, if you choose to give money to someone, here are some ways that are appropriate to give money. And that's a hard lesson for anybody to learn. If we're talking about an individual who is asking for money, who is homeless, or, for whatever reason is, not in a space where they are able to provide for themselves, it is an individual coming to you, finding ways that are systemic ways to give them support, and thinking through what are maybe amounts of money that they would want to budget to give to that person. And there might be, right, being generous with our finances within ways that don't impact our own safety is a laudable value. And so to say we don't ever give money away, that's not a great answer either. And so finding ways to say, how do we support others in ways that we find ethically enhancing the world we live in and making the world a better place, while still maintaining our own financial stability is an important balance. And it's something that I would say is an ongoing conversation within those, like, we don't ever give away banking information on the internet, or, like, and there's a couple of things where, like, okay, you want to sign up for PayPal, or you want to sign up for Venmo. So that's like giving one set of banking information to another bank. And there are times and places where that's okay. And, these are things that we all learn over time, which is kind of like a mushy answer, Jamie, but is that kind of what you were looking for? Yeah.
I know Tom DeCossola, our Denver Center Program Director at CLE, is on. Tom, if you can hear me, I know that you and your team have conversations with our CLE students really, I don't want to say all the time, but I will probably say all the time about just about online safety and online relationships. Tom, if you can hear me, I'm going to ask you to unmute. If you want to talk a little bit about what those conversations from your perspective look like, and maybe if you could provide some pointers from a center director standpoint. You work with our neurodiverse students daily, and what do those conversations look like? And do you have any input?
Yeah, we do some one-on-one social coaching, and that's usually kind of a place for students to talk about, personal goals that they have, whether it's building relationships in the community, friendships, or, dating, whatever it is. So we have these conversations quite a bit, and a lot of our students are dating, looking to date online, as I think they find that to be like a comfortable space to meet people. And I think that's kind of like a shift from when I was younger. Online dating wasn't really a thing, but that's kind of more of where folks are starting to make some of those connections, aside from people that they immediately, go to school with. So we're having a lot of conversations around how to be safe online, how to set like healthy boundaries with folks, how to look for, like some of the red flags when that you had kind of mentioned, Karen, like if folks are, wanting to know information about you. We've had students get manipulated into sending a picture of their driver's license to someone online, or sharing, sending pictures of themselves. So there's a lot of ways that, our students do get pulled into it. And, we try to get in front of it and have those conversations and see, how students are engaging online, sorry, and what that looks like, and, what kind of potential risks are there. Because with working with neurodiverse young adults, they are unfortunately sometimes preyed upon in various schemes. I would say in the past year, we've had at least 3 to 4 students get pulled into some sort of like financial scheme online. Like, hey, I really like your artwork. I'm going to send you this check, upload it to your bank account, and then it causes problems with the bank. So there's a lot of like financial things going on, but with the dating, it's sometimes trying to set healthy boundaries. I've had students date folks online who are across the country, and still there be unhealthy boundaries, manipulation, and just unhealthy stuff. So we're really trying to work with our students to like identify those things as they're online, and not just dating. A lot of them are engaging on Discord, and through Steam, and a lot of other online avenues to meet people. And sometimes that's where like some of the dating is starting, and they're interacting with people. So and other than that, finding a healthy balance. I know, one thing, to just my last statement is, I think in starting in working with college living experience many years ago, there was a focus that in real life relationships are more ideal. But as I kind of like posed in one of my questions, our students struggle with that in-person interaction, and sometimes they feel a little more confident online. So it's like trying to find a balance in, what is what is healthy, how much time is a healthy amount to spend online. What are points where that online presence might dominate and take away from like academic endeavors, or sometimes it's easy to interact with folks online, so then there's not really an interest in trying to do it in person. So it's trying to find that balance, but not making judgments that you have to date someone in person and you can't, you shouldn't be online. I think it's like recognizing that this is a new growing thing for young people, but how can we equip these young folks with having tools to not, be put in risky situations? And the same can go for in person, but I think finding that balance, and I appreciate this whole thank you, Karen, for doing this, and Jamie as well, because these are the important conversations. This is what we should talk about more.
Yeah. And I want to be sure that we get to this last question before we roll off, because I really like this question. Working with students looking for employment, I have noticed that requesting communication via email can sometimes be so informal and not appropriate when looking for employment. Any suggestions? And, I think that the thing here is we need to model different levels of formality and like have reference points for them, right? So we have friends, which is probably which is typically the least formal, right, form of communication is with friends. We have family, which is often like one step more formal than friends, right? And then we have, colleagues, and, peers who we're not friends with, right? And then we have like work environments where we are talking to bosses or potential hiring people, and being really explicit that each of those levels of communication is different. And we can learn what it's like to talk to folks at each of those levels. And then, when someone comes to you and is like, I don't know how formal to be in this conversation, you're going to have some touch points of, this person you can just talk to like a friend, or this person talk to like they're your grandmother, or this person talk to like they're a stranger at church, or this person talk to them like they're hiring you for a job. And we're going to have these increasing levels of formality with communication in the same way that we do with clothing and other ways of presenting ourselves. So, a way to think through like how formal should clothing be is very similar to how formal should communication be, should our language be. And we're actually, on a personal note, we're going to a funeral this weekend, and my 23-year-old who is autistic just texted me this morning and was like, what should I wear? How formal, is it to go? Should going to, her great grandmother's funeral? And I was like, well, dresses that you're going to a church you've never been to before. And she was like, okay, I will send you pictures later. So we have this like way of thinking about formality with clothing. Language is the same thing. And, there's a program at the University of Texas called UT Ties, which is a phenomenal program. But one of the things that they offer is they sit down with with the students who are part of that program, and they will go over every single email they send to a professor with that student and talk through every single one of those emails. And one of the things they're targeting here is formality, and what is an appropriate tone to take, and how do we achieve that tone in really concrete and specific ways. And so I think that we can start by just saying, when you're talking to a potential employer, even if they are being informal, you choosing to be more formal than them, as with clothing at an interview, as the interviewee, being the person who is the most formally dressed in the room is usually better than being the person who is the least formally dressed in the room. The same is true of our communication styles. So if we are being more formal than the other person, that's okay. They can invite us into being less formal if they choose. I would say that Jamie saying, like, call me Dr. Rayne at the beginning, and I was like, oh, no need, right? Jamie was starting off at a higher level of formality, and then was like, okay, that's not where we're sitting. That's great, right? And that's an appropriate way to approach a professional relationship, and particularly one where you were trying to get hired. Great.
It's a great question. That was a great question.
Yeah.
See.
Questions.
You're welcome, Pat. You're welcome. So I know that it's noon o'clock Central Time, or actually Mountain Time. I don't even know what time zone I'm in right now. So I just to be respectful of everyone's time, Karen, thank you so much for this information. As we all move through the journey of life with our neurodiverse young adult, just keeping them safe and healthy and on the road to adulthood successfully is we're all rowing in the same direction. So anything like this is always going to be hugely helpful. I will be sending out this recording early next week, and I will also include Karen's contact information and the Unhushed website if you are interested in the book or connecting with Karen. I know that you're always welcome to discussion with anyone who's interested to learn more. So, and always my contact information will also be there. Feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions, but we will go ahead and end now at 12 o'clock my time, whatever time zone you're in on the hour. And again, thank you all so much for joining us. And Karen, thank you for your time. And I will be sending that email out again early next week. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And I look forward to connecting with you all again very soon.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.